Under the trembling lights of America's Got Talent, the air thickened with unease as Riana de Cebu stepped slowly onto the stage. Everything about her presence defied normal expectations of a performer. She didn't smile, didn't wave, didn't even acknowledge the audience cheering her name. Instead, she stood motionless, her head tilted to one side, strands of black hair covering half her pale face. The audience fell silent as if some invisible force had swallowed every sound in the room. The bright LED screens dimmed, and the stage lights flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to move with her. Riana held an old, cracked porcelain doll in her hand, its eyes missing and its dress covered in what looked like age-old dust. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from something deeper, an emotion that was equal parts sadness and darkness. She took one slow step forward, the sound of her shoes scraping against the stage echoing through the silence. Her movement was unnaturally still, like a puppet being pulled by invisible strings. The camera zoomed in on her face, revealing her cold, empty eyes staring straight ahead, almost through the lens itself. One of the judges whispered something, but the microphone only caught static, as though the show itself was rejecting any sound other than hers. Riana looked down at her doll and began whispering something softly in Bisaya, her native tongue from the outskirts of Cebu. The words were unintelligible to most, but they carried a rhythm, like a lullaby twisted into a curse. The audience leaned forward, confused and fascinated at once. Then, the lights dimmed further until only a single spotlight shone down on her and the doll. She knelt beside it, whispering faster now, her voice trembling like wind passing through broken bamboo. The sound of a child's giggle played faintly through the speakers, though no child was on stage. Several people in the audience gasped. Her head twitched suddenly, her long hair whipping forward, and she raised the doll's head toward the judges as if presenting it. "She wants to play," Riana said softly, her voice breaking like glass. The crowd froze. The judges exchanged glances, unsure if this was part of the act or something more sinister. Behind that terrifying performance was a history written in the darkness of Cemon Cow Well, a small, impoverished barrio near Cebu. Growing up, Riana had lived without electricity, surrounded by shadows and silence. Her only companions were dolls she crafted from straw and old rags. Fear became her comfort, darkness her identity. That very childhood shaped the act she performed on that stage. Each twitch, each whisper, each eerie silence was not just acting, it was a memory. It was the sound of nights when wind moved through broken windows, and her imagination became her only escape. By the time her performance ended, the entire theater was silent again. The lights flickered back to full brightness, and Riana stood perfectly still, her doll resting peacefully at her feet. No one clapped at first, they were too stunned, too unsure whether to applaud or pray. And as she turned her head one last time, staring straight into the camera with that blank, haunting expression, one could almost feel that she wasn't performing anymore. She was living through the same darkness she once survived. Long before the stage lights and global fame, Riana de Cebu lived a life hidden in the shadows of Cemon Cow Well, a small, forgotten barrio on the outskirts of Cebu. The air there always smelled of rain and rust, and the nights stretched longer than they should, because there was no electricity to break the darkness. Her family was poor, so poor that even candles were luxuries saved for prayers or funerals. Their bamboo hut leaned crookedly to one side, patched with old tarpaulin and rusted sheets of tin. When storms came, the wind howled through the holes in the walls, and water dripped down from the roof, soaking their only bed. As a child, Riana was quiet and strange. While other children played under the sun, she preferred the night, sitting alone near a broken well at the edge of the village, whispering stories to her doll made from old rice sacks and coconut husk. The villagers thought she was odd. Some even said she could talk to spirits that lived in the dark. Every evening, when the sky turned black, Riana's world came alive. The shadows inside her house danced on the walls, forming shapes that scared most children, but fascinated her. Her mother would call her inside, warning her that ghosts roamed the fields after sunset. But Riana never felt afraid. The darkness was her only friend, her only listener. She would sit near the well. Locals called it the Cemon Cow Well, a name whispered with caution, because it was said that long ago, a young girl had drowned there, and her voice could still be heard crying at night. Sometimes, Riana would close her eyes and swear she could hear that faint crying too, blending with the croaks of frogs and the hum of crickets. That eerie calm became her comfort, her home. The doll she carried everywhere wasn't just a toy, it was her reflection, her way of keeping loneliness away. But poverty carved deep scars. Her father left when she was 9, and her mother grew sick soon after. They couldn't afford medicine, and Riana spent nights holding her mother's hand in silence, whispering to her doll for strength. When her mother finally passed, the neighbors found Riana sitting beside her body, still whispering as if her mother could hear her through the dark. From that moment, something in her changed. She stopped speaking to people altogether. Her only world was that doll, the shadows, and the memory of her mother's voice. The villagers avoided her now. They said she was cursed, that the girl from the well had chosen her. Years later, when she stood on the grand stage of America's Got Talent, she carried not just a doll, but the weight of that entire childhood with her. Every tremble in her hand, every whisper, every haunting stare was born from that poor, dark life in Cemon Cow Well. She wasn't pretending to be eerie, she was showing the world the only reality she ever knew. Her performance wasn't acting, it was truth wrapped in fear. It was the story of a girl who grew up with nothing but shadows, and turned those shadows into her greatest strength. The night of Riana de Cebu's final act on America's Got Talent began like any other, but everyone backstage could feel something different in the air, something heavy, electric, and almost supernatural. The studio lights flickered faintly even before the cameras rolled, and a quiet tension spread among the crew. Riana stood alone in the shadows behind the curtain, holding her cracked doll close to her chest. Her long black hair fell across her pale face, and her lips moved in silent prayer, or perhaps in whispering to something unseen. When the announcer finally called her name, she didn't move right away. She simply tilted her head, the way she always did, as if listening to an invisible voice. Then, slowly, she stepped forward. The crowd erupted into applause, but within seconds, their cheers dissolved into silence. The air grew cold. It was as if fear itself had walked onto the stage. Riana placed the doll gently on a small wooden chair in the center of the stage. A haunting lullaby began to play, soft, broken, and slightly distorted, like an old tape recording left too long in the rain. Her movements were sharp yet fragile, her body twitching with the grace of a puppet controlled by unseen strings. The judges watched with wide, uneasy eyes. Cemon Cow leaned forward, arms crossed, his usual confidence melting into confusion. The audience barely breathed as Riana whispered to the doll, her voice trembling like wind through bamboo. "She's here," she murmured. "She wants to play." The stage lights dimmed until only her and the doll were visible, surrounded by a soft fog that crept across the floor. For a moment, the entire studio felt like it had been transported back to Cemon Cow Well, her childhood home of darkness and whispers. Then, without warning, every light in the theater went out. Gasps echoed in the blackness. The sound of the doll falling to the floor cracked through the silence. Somewhere in the dark, a faint giggle, a child's giggle, echoed around the room. The judges shouted her name, their microphones picking up static. The audience began to panic, phones flashing in the darkness. When the lights flickered back on, Riana was gone. Only the doll remained, sitting upright on the judge's table, staring blankly ahead. The camera zoomed in on Cemon's face. He looked pale, his eyes wide in disbelief. "Was that supposed to happen?" he whispered. No one answered. The crew checked backstage, the hallways, the dressing rooms, but she had vanished without a trace. News of her disappearance spread across the internet within hours. Some claimed it was all part of the show, a brilliant illusion that blurred the line between magic and nightmare. But others weren't so sure. A few crew members swore that, after everyone left, they heard faint whispers coming from the stage, repeating in Bisaya, "Balik kosa kangitngit, I will return to the darkness." For days, the AGT stage remained eerily quiet, as if haunted by her memory. Riana de Cebu had come from poverty, pain, and darkness, but she left the world with something unforgettable, the realization that true horror doesn't come from monsters or ghosts. It comes from the shadows we carry within us, the ones that never truly leave.